So today we're going to talk about complex sentences. Complex sentences are a dependent clause and an independent clause both in one sentence. Now remember, both independent and dependent clauses have a subject and a verb. That's the definition of a clause, that it has a subject and a verb. So remember the difference between a dependent and independent clause, the difference between the two of them is that a dependent clause cannot stand alone while an independent clause can. Remember, a complete sentence is basically a synonym for an independent clause. An independent clause is a complete sentence, while a dependent clause is not a complete sentence. So let's look at this example here. Although it was raining outside, comma, I still went running. So this sentence is a complex sentence, and it has a dependent clause and an independent clause in it. So you want to look and see which is the dependent, which is the independent. So in this sentence, the orange is the dependent clause. Although it was raining outside is our dependent clause. The I still went running, the part in brownish black color, is our independent clause. So if you said I still went running, that's a complete thought. That's a complete sentence. But if I said although it was raining outside, doesn't that kind of like leave you hanging? It's something called a cliffhanger, right? That thought is not complete. Although it was raining outside, what did you do? Like if I walked up to you and I said, hey, so although it was raining outside, you'd be like, and? Well, so what, right? So that's a dependent clause. It has the subject, it, and the verb was raining, but it doesn't have a complete thought here because that word although is in the front. So these are, we're going to talk about subordinating conjunctions. That's what although is. So subordinating conjunctions join together an independent and a dependent clause. So without these conjunctions, you don't have your complex sentence. So looking at the second check mark. When complex sentences are created, comma, they make one thought dependent on another thought. So this sentence here, this is another example of a complex sentence. So look at it and decide, what is the dependent clause? What is the independent clause? Then also, what is the subordinating conjunction? So in that second sentence, when, the part in green, that's the subordinating conjunction. The subordinating conjunction always, always, always starts the dependent clause. So the way you can remember this is batwash or a woobus. I know some students have learned batwash some students have learned a woobus. So we're going to look at these subordinating conjunctions. But you need to remember that a subordinating conjunction always starts the dependent clause. So here are our subordinating conjunctions. There are more than these. These are just the commonly known ones. So after, although, as, while, when, until, before, because, if, since. So that's our woobus. Or because, after, though, when, while, though, since, how, that, until, before, if, as. Those are our batwash tubbiyas. So there are two ways to write a complex sentence. So we're going to review how to do this. There are two ways. So the first way is when you begin the complex sentence with a subordinating clause or a dependent clause. A lot of students just call it dependent clauses, but another grammar name for it is subordinating clauses because it starts with a subordinating conjunction. So what this means is when you start a complex sentence with the dependent clause, you want to have a comma after the dependent clause, and this is what you're going to have to learn and memorize. So it'll look like this: dependent clause, comma, independent clause. So an example, or another way to look at it, is the subordinate conjunction starts the dependent clause, then you have your comma, then you have your independent clause. So looking at this example, after I went to school, comma, I took a nap. So after I went to school is our dependent clause. After is the subordinating conjunction, the subordinate conjunction. After I went to school is the dependent clause. I took a nap is the independent clause. Because if I came up to you and said, I took a nap, you'd be like, cool, good for you. If I came up to you and I said, after I went to school, you'd be like, so what? What happened after you went to school? Right? It kind of leaves you hanging there. Like I said, there are two ways to start or to create a complex sentence. Here's the second way. You end with a subordinating clause. So you end your sentence with that dependent clause. So it looks like this: IC, DC. No comma. This is the difference you're going to have to memorize. So there's no comma when you end with the dependent clause and start with an independent clause. It looks like this: independent clause, subordinate conjunction, dependent clause. So I took a nap after I went to school. Here's the reason. Here is the logic. When you end a sentence with a dependent clause, notice that that word after right here is in the middle. It's between the independent and the dependent clause. Because that conjunction's in the middle, you don't need a comma. Basically, the comma does the job of that conjunction. But when you start with the dependent clause, the conjunction's all the way in the front. So the comma kind of jumps in there and helps us out because there's no conjunction in the middle. So looking at some more examples. After Mary hit the ball, comma, she ran to first base. We have our subordinate conjunction after. We have our dependent clause after Mary hit the ball. Because after is in the front up here, we have the comma here. We need that comma. She ran to first base. The comma follows the dependent clause when it starts the sentence. However, when you end the sentence with the dependent clause, then it's Mary ran to first base after she hit the ball. Because that subordinate conjunction after is in the middle, we don't need the comma. Mary ran to first base is the independent clause. After she hit the ball is our dependent clause. So therefore, no comma is used when the dependent clause follows the independent clause.